him back! Where?
Brothers and sisters, before you scroll past this video, promise me one thing, stay till the very end. What I am about to tell you is not from a movie or a book. It is the kind of story old women in my grandmother's village still lower their voices to tell, the kind that makes even the bravest hunter check the water before he drinks from it. This is the story of two sisters, one river, and a debt that was never truly forgiven. By the end, you will understand why, in some villages along the Niger, mothers still forbid their daughters from making promises near moving water. Settle in, and whatever you do, do not stop watching, because the twist coming is one you will not see, and if you leave early, you will never learn why the river still remembers. Long ago, in a village called Umusi, tucked between red earth hills and a wide, slow river that the elders called Theohia, there lived two sisters born of the same mother but shaped by very different fates. The elder was named Adaeze, and the younger was named Ifeyinwa. Their mother, a quiet trader named Mama Yuzo, raised them alone after their father was swallowed by a fever no herbalist could cure. She sold palm oil and dried fish at the village market, and every coin she earned, she poured into her daughters, hoping one day they would stand taller than the hardship that had built them. From the outside, Adaeze and Ifeyinwa looked like two halves of the same soul. They walked to the stream together every morning, clay pots balanced on their heads. They laughed at the same jokes and shared the same wrapper on cold harmattan nights. But underneath that closeness, something had always been growing in Adaeze, quiet and patient, like a weed beneath a flower bed. Adaeze was the first daughter, and in Umusi that was supposed to mean the first choice of suitors, the first inheritance, the first blessing at every gathering. But it was Ifeyinwa the village loved, Ifeyinwa the elders smiled at, Ifeyinwa's name that came up whenever mothers spoke of the kind of wife they wanted for their sons. It was not that Ifeyinwa did anything to steal that love. She simply had a gentleness that could not be manufactured, the kind of warmth that made old widows call her, my own daughter, even though she was not, the kind of laughter that made market women save the best tomatoes for her without being asked. Adaeze noticed all of it. She noticed the way people's eyes softened for her sister and hardened, just slightly, for her. She told herself it did not matter. She told herself blood was blood, and love was love, and that when their mother was gone, she, as the first daughter, would inherit what mattered most, the mud house, the small parcel of farmland by the river, and the family name. Then Mama Yuzo fell sick. It happened slowly, the way sickness sometimes agrees to be merciful before it changes its mind. She grew thin. Her hands, once strong enough to carry 2 baskets of yam up a hill, began to shake around a cup of water. The village dibia, the medicine man everyone consulted before the missionaries' hospital was built 2 towns away, examined her and shook his head in that particular way healers shake their heads when they already know what they will not say out loud. On the night Mama Yuzo knew she was going to die, she called her daughters to her mat. Adaeze arrived first, already composing in her mind the words she expected to hear about being the eldest, about carrying the family forward, about the land by the river being hers to protect. Ifeyinwa arrived moments later, eyes already wet, kneeling and taking their mother's fragile hand. Mama Yuzo looked at both her daughters for a long time before she spoke. My daughters, she said, her voice a thread pulled thin, I do not have much to give either of you. What I have is small. A house with a leaking roof. A strip of farmland. Some cooking pots. But there is one thing that is not small, and I must give it carefully. She reached beneath her mat and pulled out a pendant carved from river stone, black and smooth, threaded on a cord of woven raffia. Adaeze's breath caught. She knew that pendant. Every child in Umusi grew up hearing about it in whispers, though no one spoke of it directly in daylight. It was said to have belonged to their great-grandmother, a priestess who had once served the river spirit that the village both feared and depended on for good harvests and safe crossings. The stone was said to carry a kind of protection, a kind of recognition, so that the river would always know the wearer as family, and would never take from that family more than it gave. This, Mama Yuzo said, closing Ifeyinwa's fingers around it, belongs to you, my last daughter. Not because I love you more. Do you hear me? Not because I love you more. Her eyes moved to Adaeze, pleading, as if she already sensed the storm her words would summon. But because you have always had a gentle heart, Ifeyinwa, and this pendant does not protect greed. It protects gentleness. If your sister wore it with a hungry heart, it would not save her. It might do worse. Adaeze said nothing that night. She knelt beside her dying mother and let her face arrange itself into something that looked like understanding. But inside her, something cracked, quiet as a hairline fracture in old pottery, the kind of crack you do not notice until, one day, the whole pot falls apart in your hands. Mama Yuzu died 3 nights later, under a sky so clear the stars looked close enough to touch. The village mourned her the way villages mourn women who gave everything and kept nothing. Ifeyinwa cried until her voice went hoarse. Adaeze cried too, but even as the tears fell, a colder, more deliberate thought was forming behind her eyes, something that would take root and grow for years before it finally bore its terrible fruit. Brothers and sisters, I want you to remember this moment, because everything that follows begins here, in the space between 2 sisters and a single choice made by a dying woman who only wanted to protect the one she believed needed protecting most. Sometimes the people we try hardest to shield are the ones who end up hurt the deepest by the shielding. Keep that thought close. We are only getting started. The years that followed were not cruel to Adaeze in any way the village could see. She married a modestly successful trader named Okonkwo, moved into his compound 2 villages over, and built a life that, on its surface, looked comfortable. But comfort was never what Adaeze wanted. She wanted to be undeniable, the kind of wealth that made people lower their eyes. Ifeyinwa, meanwhile, married a farmer named Chibuzo, a quiet, hard-working man with laughing eyes, and settled close enough to the river that she still fetched water from the same bend her mother once used. She wore the black stone pendant every day, tucked beneath her wrapper, and as the years passed it became, to her, simply her mother's memory hanging around her neck. She did not know that somewhere in the village, her sister had never stopped thinking about it. Adaeze's trading business struggled. Her husband's health began to fail after a farming accident left him with a permanent limp and a body too weak for long journeys to distant markets. Debt piled quietly, one small loan becoming three becoming a mountain that cast a shadow over every meal. Every night Adaeze lay awake calculating numbers that refused to add up in her favor. It was during this season of desperation that Adaeze first heard whispers of a man who lived deep past the old Iroko trees at the edge of Umusi's farmland, a man some called a dibia and others called something far less kind. His name was Ismiri, which some said was not a name at all but a title, meaning king of the water. Villagers spoke of him only in careful, measured tones, the way you speak about a fire you respect but do not trust. Some said he could speak with the spirit of the river itself. Others said he had once lost his entire family to drowning, and had made a bargain of his own to survive, and had never been fully human since. Brothers and sisters, in every village, there is a name like this. A name spoken in half whispers. A name mothers used to frighten children into obedience. Behave, or Ismiri will hear of it. But names like this exist because, somewhere, at some point, they were true. And Adaeze, blinded by death and years of quiet resentment, walked into the forest one evening with a basket of kola nuts and a heart heavy with the kind of desperation that makes people believe anything if it promises relief. The path to Ismiri's hut was longer than anyone described it, winding past trees that seemed to lean closer the deeper she walked. When she finally arrived, she found an old man seated outside a hut of mud and river reed, a small fire crackling in front of him despite there being no wind, its flames bending sideways as if bowing to something unseen. "You did not come for kola nuts," the old man said before she even opened her mouth. His eyes, she would later tell no one, were the exact grey-green color of river water under a clouded sky. "You came because the river owes your family, and you have decided it is time to collect." Adaeze's mouth went dry. "My mother," she began, "left something with my sister. A pendant. a blessing that should have been mine. Ifeyinwa did not blink. Blessings cannot be stolen the way you wish to steal this one. But debts, he said slowly, savoring the word, debts can be transferred. If you are willing to pay the price of transfer. Name it, Adaeze said, too quickly, too hungrily, the way people speak when they have already decided the answer does not matter. The old man smiled, and something about that smile made the fire between them gutter, just for a moment, as though even the flames were uncomfortable with what was about to be said. The river does not deal in money. It deals in blood that is owed and blood that is offered. Your sister carries protection that was never truly yours to take. But if you offer the river something of equal weight, in her place, it will listen. It will remember the offering, not the birthright. What must I offer? A promise, Ifeyinwa said. Sealed at the water's edge, under a moon with no light, spoken in the blood of your own palm. You will promise the river the first child born of your sister's womb. In exchange, wealth will find you the way water finds the lowest ground. It will not ask permission. It will simply come. Now, brothers and sisters, I want you to sit with what Adaeze did next, because this is the moment upon which the entire rest of this story turns. A reasonable person, a person with even a shred of the love she once carried for her sister, would have turned and walked back through those leaning trees and never looked back. But desperation had hollowed something out of Adaeze over the years, and hollow spaces have a terrible way of filling with whatever is offered to them. She said yes. 3 nights later, on a moonless night, Adaeze stood at the river's edge with Ifeyinwa beside her, a small blade glinting in the starlight. She pressed her palm to the flat of the blade, felt the sting, and watched 3 drops of her own blood fall into the black water. Ifeyinwa chanted words she did not recognize, words that rippled outward across the surface though there was no wind, nothing to explain the way the water moved in response. It is done, he said finally, and the water grew still again, unnervingly still, like a held breath. The river has heard you. The river has accepted. What is promised will be collected, in its own time, in its own way. You cannot undo this, Adaeze, daughter of Mama Yuzo. You can only wait for the dead to come due. Adaeze walked home that night feeling lighter than she had in years, as though a weight she had been carrying without realizing it had finally been set down. She did not think, even once, about what that lightness had cost. She did not think about her sister's face, or her sister's laughter, or the way Ifeyinwa had once given her the last piece of yam when they were children even though she herself was hungry. She thought only of the debts that would soon disappear. The market stalls that would soon multiply, the respect that would soon replace the quiet pity she had spent years pretending not to notice. And brothers and sisters, the river kept its word. Within a month, a distant cousin arrived with news of an inheritance dispute resolved unexpectedly in Adaeze's favor. Within 3 months, a trading opportunity fell into Okonkwo's lap that tripled their income overnight. Within a year, Adaeze had 2 market stalls instead of none, a new roof over her house, and a growing reputation as a woman whose luck had simply, mysteriously, turned. The village noticed. In a place like Umusi, wealth that arrives too quickly always draws questions. But Adaeze had answers ready for everyone, smooth explanations delivered with the practice calm of someone who had rehearsed her lies in the mirror, hard work, good fortune, the blessings of her late mother watching over her. She said that last one, brothers and sisters, with a straight face, standing in the very market her mother once sold palm oil in to survive. Meanwhile, Ifeyinwa's life continued in its quiet, gentle rhythm, untouched by any of it, unaware that somewhere in the dark water she fetched from every morning, a promise had been made about the child she and Chibuzo had been trying, unsuccessfully, for 3 years to conceive. And then, in the 4th year of their marriage, Ifeyinwa discovered she was pregnant. The joy in her household was the kind of joy that spills outward, that neighbors feel through walls, that makes even strangers passing on the road smile without knowing why. Chibuzo built a small extension to their hut with his own hands, humming as he walked. Ifeyinwa touched the black stone pendant at her throat every morning and every night, whispering thanks to her mother, unaware that the very protection she believed the pendant offered had already been quietly, cruelly bypassed by the bargain her sister struck at the river's edge. Adaeze heard the news of her sister's pregnancy at the market, from a woman who did not know, could not have known, what those words would do to the person hearing them. For a moment, standing there among baskets of pepper and dried fish, Adaeze felt something twist violently in her chest, something that might have been guilt if she had allowed herself to name it. But she did not allow herself to name it. She told herself the death was fair. She told herself her sister had lived her whole life with the village's love, with the pendant, with the easier path, and that this was simply the universe correcting an old imbalance. She told herself many things that night, and by morning, she had convinced herself of all of them. Brothers and sisters, before we go further, I want to pause and ask you something. Have you ever made a decision you knew, somewhere deep down, was wrong, but told yourself a story convincing enough to keep moving forward anyway? Comment below and tell me honestly, because what happens next in this story will show you exactly where that kind of thinking leads. Now, let us continue, because the river was only just beginning to collect what it was owed. Ifeyinwa's pregnancy progressed without complication for the first 6 months, and the whole village began preparing for the naming ceremony months in advance, the way villages do when a birth is anticipated with particular love. But in the 7th month, strange things began happening near the river, small things at first, the kind of things people dismiss until they can no longer be dismissed. Fishermen reported nets coming up empty in sections of the river that had never failed them before, as though something beneath the surface was steering the fish away. Children who played near the water's edge reported a humming sound beneath the current, low and rhythmic, like a lullaby sung by something that had forgotten the words. An elderly woman named Mama Chike swore she saw a shape moving beneath the water one evening, too large and too deliberate to be any fish she had ever known, gliding upstream toward the very bend where Ifeyinwa fetched her water every morning. Ifeyinwa herself began having dreams of standing waist-deep in dark water while something unseen circled her ankles, whispering a name that was not quite her own but felt uncomfortably close. She woke from these dreams with her heart pounding, her hand closing around the black stone pendant, though even that small comfort had begun, without her realizing it, to feel colder than it used to. She mentioned the dreams to Chibuzo, who dismissed them as the ordinary anxieties of an expectant mother. She mentioned them to the village dibia, a kind but aging man named Papa Okoye, who asked careful questions about the pendant, her family history, and anything unusual that had happened to those close to her lately. Ifeyinwa, trusting as always, mentioned that her sister's fortunes had changed remarkably in the past year. Papa Okoye grew very quiet after that. He told her, carefully, to avoid the river for the rest of her pregnancy, sending Chibuzo or a neighbor to fetch water instead, and to never remove the pendant, not even to bathe. He did not voice his suspicion, because suspicion without proof could tear a family apart. But brothers and sisters, Papa Okoye knew the old stories. He knew what a bargain struck at the water's edge on a moonless night could mean, and he knew pendants were built to protect against threats from outside the family, never against betrayal from within it. Ifeyinwa gave birth on a rainy night in the 8th month, 6 weeks early, in a labor so difficult the village midwife feared for both mother and child until the last moment. A baby girl arrived just before dawn, small but breathing steadily, and Ifeyinwa named her Chidinma, meaning a God is good, a name chosen in defiant gratitude against a labor that had tried its hardest to take everything from her. Word of the birth reached Adaeze within the day, carried by a passing trader who mentioned it casually, the way news travels through market gossip. And brothers and sisters, I need you to understand what happened inside Adaeze when she heard that name. Something cold settled over her, a dread she could not name but could not shake either, because somewhere in the deepest part of her, she understood, without wanting to, that the birth of that child meant the debt she owed had finally, truly come due. She told herself it was nothing. She told herself the bargain was old, half remembered, Perhaps even something Mary had exaggerated to frighten her into gratitude. She told herself many comfortable lies in the weeks that followed, lies that let her sleep at night, lies that let her hold her own 2 children, a boy and a girl she had raised in growing wealth and growing distance from the sister she had betrayed. But brothers and sisters, the river does not forget. And the river, as you are about to learn, does not forgive delays either. On the night Chidinma turned 1 month old, during the small naming ceremony the family held quietly, a strange mist rolled up from the river and settled over Omusi, thick and low, smelling of wet stone and something sweeter underneath, almost like rot. Dogs throughout the village began howling in unison after nightfall, a sound that sent chickens fleeing their coops and made even the bravest young men reach for the machetes kept by their doors. Inside Ifeyinwa's hut, the baby began crying in a way she never had before, sharper and more frantic, as though sensing a presence the adults around her could not see. Ifeyinwa held her close, rocking her, singing the lullaby her own mother once sang, and slowly the crying subsided. But when she looked down at her sleeping daughter in the lamplight, she noticed something that made her blood run cold, a faint, damp handprint on the blanket, too large for any adult in the room, fingers unnaturally long, already fading as though being reabsorbed back into wherever it came from. Chibuzo saw it too. Neither of them slept at night. And in the morning, without discussing it aloud, both of them understood, in the wordless way that fear sometimes communicates faster than language, that something had visited their home, and that it had come looking specifically for their daughter. Brothers and sisters, this is where the story takes its first real turn, and I promise you, what comes next is only the beginning of the horror this family was about to face. If you have made it this far, please, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel, because trust me, you do not want to miss where this goes. Now, let us continue. Papa Okoye was summoned the next morning, and upon hearing about the mist, the howling dogs, the handprint, his face lost its usual gentle patience. He performed a protective ritual over the child immediately, burning dried herbs around the doorway, drawing lines of white chalk across the threshold, and tying a fresh cord of blessed raffia around the baby's tiny wrist alongside the pendant her mother already wore. Something has laid a claim on this child, he told Ifeyinwa and Chibuzo bluntly, no longer softening his words the way he had during her pregnancy. I do not yet know the shape of the claim, but I know it is old, and I know it did not begin with you or your husband. Ifeyinwa, I must ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly, because your daughter's safety depends on it. Has anyone close to you made a bargain with the river? Anyone at all? Ifeyinwa's mind, brothers and sisters, went immediately, instinctively, to her sister. Not because she suspected Adaeze of anything so dark, not consciously, but because some quiet part of her had noticed, over the past year, the strange speed of her sister's rising fortune, the way Adaeze had grown distant just as her wealth grew close, the way certain conversations between them had started ending in awkward silences whenever the pendant, or their mother, or the river, came up. She voiced these observations to Papa Okoye hesitantly, almost apologetically, as though speaking them aloud felt like a betrayal of her own. Papa Okoye's expression, when she finished, was grim in a way that frightened her more than the mist had. I must speak with your sister, he said. Tonight, if possible. Before the river tries again. But brothers and sisters, the river did not wait for that conversation to happen. That same evening, as Chibuzo walked a short distance to fetch Adaeze from her compound 2 villages over, disaster struck at Ifeyinwa's home in his absence. Ifeyinwa had stepped outside briefly to bring in laundry before the evening rains began, leaving her sleeping daughter watched over by a young cousin who had come to help with the household chores during her recovery. The cousin, a girl no older than 13, would later swear, tearfully, before the entire village council, that she had only looked away for the length of time it takes to answer a question shouted from the next room. But when she looked back at the woven basket where Chidinma slept, the child was gone. Not crying. Not moved to another corner of the room. Simply gone, the blanket left in a damp, cold circle exactly the shape and size of where a small body had been lying moments before, water pooling at its edges as though the child had somehow dissolved directly into liquid and seeped away through the packed earth floor. The scream Ifeyinwa let out when she came back inside and found the empty, damp basket, brothers and sisters, is a sound the elders of Umusi still describe as the worst thing they have ever heard a human being produce, a sound that brought half the village running with lamps and machetes into the rain-soaked night, a sound that reached Adaeze's compound 2 villages away before Chibuzo himself did, carried, some say, not by wind but by the same current that had taken the child. The search lasted through the entire night, torches bobbing along both banks, men wading into the shallows, women praying in clusters at the water's edge, Papa Okoye chanting protective invocations that seemed to do nothing against whatever had already claimed what it came for. Ifeyinwa herself waded into the river at one point, screaming her daughter's name until Chibuzo and 2 other men had to drag her back to shore. It was near dawn, as the search party's hope began to flicker like their dying torches, that Adaeze finally arrived, breathless, having run the distance between the 2 villages the moment word reached her. And brothers and sisters, watch her face closely here, because what happens next reveals everything about who Adaeze truly was beneath the years of careful eyes. She did not ask what happened. She did not need to. The moment she saw the damp, empty basket and heard the word river spoken among the search party, her face drained of all color, and she sank to her knees in the mud outside her sister's hut, not from exhaustion, but from the sudden, crushing collapse of every excuse she had built for herself over the past year. Papa Okoye, watching this reaction with the sharp eyes of a man who had spent a lifetime reading truth in the smallest of human gestures, walked slowly toward her. Adaeze, he said, his voice low enough that only she and Ifeyinwa, standing frozen nearby, could hear it clearly. What did you do? And brothers and sisters, this is the moment the entire village, and you, watching this story unfold, have been waiting for. Because what Adaeze said next was the confession that would tear apart everything anyone in Umusi thought they understood about the 2 sisters, about wealth, about family, and about the true price of the debts we make in the dark when we think no one is watching. I did not think it would take her, Adaeze whispered, her voice barely audible over the rain. I thought it would find another way. A different kind of payment. I did not think it would actually take the child. Ifeyinwa's scream this time was different from the first, sharper, more furious, the scream of a woman realizing that the danger to her child had a face, and that face belonged to her own sister. She lunged at Adaeze, and it took 3 men to hold her back, her fingers clawing at the air just inches from her sister's terrified face, her voice cracking as she demanded, over and over, to know what her sister had done, what bargain, what promise, what price had been paid with her daughter's life. Adaeze told them everything, right there in the mud and rain, the words stumbling out of her in a confession years overdue, the visit to Izmiri, the blood on the blade, the promise made under a moonless sky, the wealth that had followed with unnatural speed, the debt she had spent a year pretending would somehow resolve itself without cost. Brothers and sisters, before I tell you what happened next, I want you to sit with the weight of this moment. A mother, standing in the rain, learning that her own sister sold her unborn child's safety for market stalls and a new roof. If this were you, if you discovered a betrayal this deep from someone who shared your own mother's blood, what would you do? Comment below, because I want to know, and trust me, the choice Ifeyinwa made next will surprise you more than anything you are imagining right now. Papa Okoye, ever the voice of careful urgency in the chaos, cut through the screaming and accusations with a single sharp command. There is still time, he said, but only if we move now. A bargain struck in blood can sometimes be answered in blood, if the one who struck it is willing to pay what she promised herself, in place of what was taken. Adaeze, are you willing? The village fell silent, the only sound the rain and the distant murmur of the river, patient, waiting, as it had been waiting for over a year already. Adaeze, brothers and sisters, sat frozen in that silence for what felt like an eternity. Every instinct of self-preservation she had built her entire adult life around screamed at her to refuse, to run, to disappear back into the wealth and comfort she had traded her family's peace for. But something else moved in her too, something old and buried beneath years of resentment and desperation, something that remembered being a little girl sharing a wrapper with her sister on cold harmattan nights, something that remembered the last piece of yam Ifeyinwa had once given her without being asked. "Yes," Adaeze said finally, her voice steadier than anyone expected. "Take me instead." Papa Okoye led the entire village down to the river's edge, to the exact bend where Adaeze had made her original bargain more than a year before. The water there was unnaturally still despite the rain hammering its surface everywhere else, a circle of calm at the center of the storm, as though something beneath was listening, waiting to see what the humans gathered at its edge would do. Papa Okoye instructed Adaeze to remove her wrapper of fine imported cloth, purchased with money she now understood to be soaked in a debt no market profit could ever truly repay, and to wade into the water wearing nothing but the plain cotton underdress she had worn as a young girl fetching water with her sister, decades before wealth had ever come between them. He instructed her to speak the same words she had spoken the night of her original bargain, but this time, to offer herself, fully, completely, in place of the child. Ifeyinwa, still shaking, still furious, still grieving, stepped forward before her sister could wade in. "Wait," she said, her voice raw. And brothers and sisters, what Ifeyinwa did next is the reason this story has been told and retold in Umusi for years, the reason old women still speak of it in careful, respectful tones even now. She removed the black stone pendant from around her own neck, the very inheritance that had started this entire chain of betrayal, and pressed it into her sister's shaking hands. "Our mother said this protects gentleness," Ifeyinwa said, tears mixing freely with the rain on her face. "You have not been gentle, Adaeze. Not for a long time. But I remember when you were. I remember before the market, before the debts, before whatever hollowed you out enough to make that bargain. If you are going to walk into that water and offer yourself for what you took from me, you will not do it without a chance at protection. Wait. Not because you have earned it. But because I am choosing, one more time, to believe there is enough of my sister left in you to deserve the choice. Brothers and sisters, I want you to understand what an extraordinary act of mercy this was. A mother who had just lost her infant daughter to a bargain her own sister made, choosing in that moment not vengeance, but a final, desperate act of love toward the very person who had betrayed her most. If you have ever wondered whether forgiveness in the face of true betrayal is even possible, hold on to this moment, because what happens in the water next will answer that question in a way you will never forget. Adaeze waded into the river wearing the pendant, the water rising past her ankles, her knees, her waist, cold and dark and alive with a current that seemed to pull specifically at her, ignoring the natural flow of the river entirely. She spoke the old words again, her voice cracking with fear and grief and something that finally, after a year of careful denial, sounded like genuine remorse. "I offer myself," she said, the rain and river both roaring around her. "Take me in her place. Take me in the child's place. I am the one who made the promise. Let the debt end with me." For a long moment, nothing happened. The village watched from the bank, torches guttering in the rain, Ifeyinwa held tightly by Chibuzo, Papa Okoye standing at the water's edge with his hands raised in silent invocation. Then, brothers and sisters, the water around Adaeze began to move. Not the ordinary movement of a current, but something deliberate, curling around her legs, pulling her deeper with a strength no river should have. She gasped, struggled, and the pendant at her throat began glowing faintly, a pale light pushing back against the darkness, the exact protection their mother had promised on her deathbed years before, protection meant for gentleness, now tested against the desperate, genuine remorse of a woman finally trying, in her final moments, to be gentle again. The struggle between the light and the pulling darkness lasted only seconds, though everyone on the bank would later swear it felt like hours. And then, with a sound like a great exhale, like the river itself releasing a held breath, the water calmed completely. Adaeze stood chest deep in suddenly still water, gasping, alive, the pendant's light fading back to ordinary black stone against her skin. And floating gently on the surface of the water beside her, wrapped inexplicably still in the same blanket she had disappeared in, utterly dry despite the water surrounding her, was baby Chidinma, crying the ordinary, healthy, furious cry of a hungry infant who had somehow, impossibly, survived. Brothers and sisters, the entire village erupted, Ifeyinwa breaking free of Chibuzo's grip to wade into the water herself, scooping her daughter into her arms, sobbing with a relief so profound it seemed to shake the very ground beneath them. Adaeze stood in the water beside them, shaking, weeping, alive, the debt she had carried for over a year finally, truly, paid in full, not with a stolen child, but with her own genuine willingness to sacrifice herself in that child's place. Papa Okoye later explained to the village council that the river spirit had never wanted the child specifically. It wanted what every such bargain ultimately demands, a genuine offering, freely given, not stolen through the theft of an innocent life that had no part in the original promise. Adaeze's initial bargain had been made in cowardice, offering someone else's future to save her own comfort. Her final act at the river's edge had been made in courage, offering her own life to save someone else's. The river understood the difference, and accepted the second offering as full payment for the first. Adaeze survived that night, but she was never quite the same afterward. She sold both her market stalls within the month, giving away most of the proceeds to families who had struggled the way her own once had. She and Ifeyinwa did not become close again overnight, some wounds take years to close. But they rebuilt something, slowly, meeting each week, eventually returning to something resembling the closeness of their childhood, two sisters choosing, every day, to carry their history together rather than apart. Chidinma grew up healthy and strong, and to this day, the story goes, she has never once been able to explain why she has always felt a strange, instinctive calm near moving water, and ease that even she cannot name, as though some part of her still remembers floating safely on a river that chose, in the end, mercy over collection. And the black stone pendant, brothers and sisters, was eventually passed not to one daughter, but buried at the base of the old Iroko tree near the river's bend, at Papa Okoye's careful instruction, so that no future generation of that family would ever again be tempted to remember it as an inheritance worth stealing, or a debt worth paying with someone else's blood. The village of Umusi still stands today, though the river has since been given a new name by younger generations who no longer remember the old stories in full. But the elders remember. They still warn their daughters never to make promises near moving water, never to bargain with what does not belong to them, and never to let jealousy convince them that someone else's blessing is a theft rather than a different shape of love. The lesson of this story, if I may leave you with one before we close tonight, is not simply that betrayal is wrong, though of course it is. It is that the debts we create through envy and desperation do not disappear simply because we refuse to look at them. They wait. They grow. And eventually, they demand payment, often from those we love most, unless we find the courage, before it is too late, to offer something more honest in their place, not our comfort, not our excuses, but the truth of who we have become, and the willingness to change it. If this story moved you, if it kept you glued to your screen the way I promised it would, please, take a moment right now to like this video, subscribe to the channel if you have not already, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next story. Tell me in the comments, what would you have done in Ifeyinwa's place, standing at that river's edge? Would you have offered your sister the pendant, or would you have let the river take what it came for? I read every single comment, and I cannot wait to hear what you believe about mercy, about betrayal, and about the debts we owe the people who share our blood. Until next time, brothers and sisters, remember, the river always remembers. Make sure you do too.